The Last Human Standing. Part 1, Welcome to the Academy. The quantum lift doors hissed open with a soft pneumatic whisper, and recruit James Thorn stepped into what felt like the opening scene of a cosmic joke. The massive orientation hall of the Galactic Defense Force Academy stretched before him, its crystalline walls reaching up toward a ceiling that seemed to merge with the star-filled sky above. The artificial gravity felt slightly off, just enough to remind him that he was light years away from Earth. At 23, Thorn was among the first humans ever accepted into the Academy. His acceptance had made headlines back home: Earth's finest joins galactic elite. Now, standing in the cavernous hall surrounded by beings that defied his understanding of biology, those headlines felt like a weight pressing down on his shoulders. "Oh, look what the gravitational pool dragged in," a voice chirped from somewhere above. Thorn looked up to see a Nexilian perched on a support beam, their iridescent wings folded neatly against their back. The alien's multifaceted eyes caught the light, reflecting a kaleidoscope of colors. "They're letting primates enroll now?" Scattered laughter echoed through the hall, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and sounds Thorn's translator struggled to process. He squared his shoulders and kept walking, pretending not to notice how the other recruits parted before him like he was carrying some contagious disease. He'd expected this reaction. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Defense Force, and their reputation preceded them. "Careful, Zix, for 27, another voice rumbled, this one belonging to a towering Kronxian whose crystalline skin refracted light in dazzling patterns. "I heard these humans break easily. Wouldn't want to damage the Academy's new pet project." More laughter. Thorn tightened his grip on his regulation duffel bag, knuckles whitening. The Academy's acceptance rate was 0.01% across all species. He'd earned his place here, same as them. The countless hours of zero-G training, the neural interface adaptability tests, the xenobiology crash courses, none of it had been handed to him. A group of Myrians floated by, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the hall's ambient lighting. "Their neural processing speed is laughable," one of them commented, not bothering to lower their voice. "No quantum computing capabilities whatsoever. They still use biological synapses. Can you believe it?" Thorn reached the central platform where new recruits were gathering. His environmental suit, mandatory for humans in most parts of the Academy, felt suddenly restrictive. The suit's heads-up display flashed with warnings about elevated heart rate and cortisol levels. He forced himself to take deep breaths, remembering his training. "Welcome, recruits," a booming voice cut through the chatter. An enormous hologram materialized in the center of the hall, depicting Commandant Axer, a legendary Celestian whose nebulous form stretched nearly to the ceiling. The Commandant's cosmic eyes, swirling with what looked like miniature galaxies, swept across the gathering. "You represent the finest your species have to offer," Axer continued. "Together, you will train to become the next generation of the Galactic Defense Force." The Commandant's gaze lingered on each section of the crowd. "Some of you come from warrior races." Appreciative murmurs from the Kronxians. "Others from species of unparalleled intellectual achievement." The Myrians straightened their metallic spines. "And some." The cosmic eyes found Thorn. "From civilizations we are still getting to know." "Great," Thorn muttered under his breath. "No pressure." An ion recruit next to him twitched their antenna. "I heard humans can't even perform basic telepathic communication," they broadcasted loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "They have to rely on crude vocal vibrations." "How primitive." "At least they're entertaining," Zix, for 27 called down from their perch. "Watch this." "Hey, human, catch." The Nexilian spat a glob of adhesive biotoxin toward Thorn. With reflexes honed by years of zero-G training, Thorn sidestepped the projectile, letting it splat harmlessly against the floor. "Sorry to disappoint," he said, flashing a grin that was all teeth, "but humans are also pretty good at dodging." The Nexilian's wings buzzed in annoyance, but before they could respond, the orientation hall's lighting shifted to training configuration. "Report to your assigned quarters," the commandant's hologram instructed. "Tomorrow, we begin." As Thorn made his way to the residential wing, he caught snippets of conversations in various languages, most of them questioning how a mere human had been admitted to the academy. Let them talk, he thought. They'd learn soon enough that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in regeneration, telepathy, or biological weapons. It was in being underestimated. His assigned pod was at the end of a long corridor, isolated from the others. The door recognized his biometric signature and slid open with a soft hiss. The space inside was a perfect cube, roughly 5 meters on each side, with walls that seemed to shift between solid and transparent. A morphic bed occupied one corner, struggling briefly to accommodate human physiology before settling into an approximation of a mattress. "Begin cadet profile scan," he commanded the room's AI. The AI's response was immediate: species, human. Enhanced capabilities, none detected. Biological limitations, multiple. Threat assessment, minimal. Thorn laughed. "We'll see about that." Through the quantum glass window, he could see the 3 moons of Centaurus Prime rising over the horizon, casting multiple shadows across the Academy's gleaming spires. Earth was invisible from here, just another pinprick of light lost in the vast cosmic ocean. But its gravity still pulled at him, a reminder of where he came from and why he was here. He unpacked his few belongings, a handful of personal items, his backup environmental suit components, and a small hollow projector containing messages from his family. The last item he removed was a worn physical book, an oddity in this age of neural downloads and quantum data storage. The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. His grandmother had given it to him before he left Earth, telling him that sometimes the oldest wisdom was the most valuable. "If you know yourself and know your enemy," he quoted softly, "you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The problem was, he wasn't sure he knew either. These aliens, with their biological advantages and technological superiority, seemed to operate on a completely different level. And himself? He was beginning to wonder if he truly understood what humans were capable of. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on his neural interface. It was his training schedule for the next day: advanced xenophysics, quantum combat theory, and something called species integration exercises. The last one sounded particularly ominous. Thorn lay back on the morphic bed, which was still trying to figure out the optimal configuration for human spinal support. Tomorrow would be his first real test. He could already imagine the sneers and dismissive comments he'd face, the constant reminder that he was considered inferior by virtually every metric these advanced species valued. But as he drifted off to sleep, his grandmother's voice echoed in his mind: "The oak fears not the wind, nor the rain, nor the countless storms it has yet to face. It simply grows stronger with each challenge." He would show them. Not with regenerative abilities or quantum computing or telepathic prowess, but with something uniquely human: the stubborn refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. As the artificial night cycle dimmed the lights in his pod, Thorn smiled. They thought humans were primitive, limited, weak. Perfect. Being underestimated might just be the greatest advantage he could ask for. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was the reflection of Centaurus Prime's moons on his environmental suit's visor, 3 distant lights reminding him that he was farther from home than any human had ever been. But tomorrow, he would begin proving that distance wasn't the only record humans were capable of breaking. First Blood. The Academy's combat simulation chamber was a massive geodesic dome where gravity, atmosphere, and reality itself could be manipulated at the instructor's whims. Thorn stood among his fellow cadets, trying to ignore the way his environmental suit's cooling system struggled to keep up with his anxiety-induced temperature spike. Lieutenant Crix, a Vulturian whose plasma-based form rippled with barely contained energy, floated before them. Today's exercise: survival in extreme environments. Your suits, a dismissive glance at Thorn's human-specific gear, will protect you from immediate death. Everything else is up to you. Thorn checked his environment suit seals for the third time. Unlike his classmates, he couldn't survive vacuum exposure, acid atmospheres, or radiation storms without protection. One suit failure and he'd be either very dead or very embarrassed, assuming there was enough left of him to feel embarrassment. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. The chamber transformed into a churning hellscape of sulfuric acid rain and electrical storms. Through the caustic downpour, Thorn could see his fellow cadets adapting with ease. The Kronxian's crystalline body simply deflected the acid, while the Etherian turned gaseous to ride the storm currents. Zix 427 secreted a protective coating and gave Thorn a pitying look. Struggling already, human. Vex called out as a lightning bolt struck their crystalline form and dispersed harmlessly. Maybe you should have joined the maintenance crew instead. Thorn ignored them, focusing on reading the atmospheric patterns. Humans might not have natural defenses, but they had millions of years of experience reading weather. There was a pattern to the lightning strikes, a rhythm to the acid rain. While his classmates relied on their biological advantages, Thorn calculated, timed, and moved with precision through the chaos. He was the only one who completed the course without being hit once. Acceptable performance, Lieutenant Crix noted, their plasma form flickering with what might have been approval. Though relying on artificial protection is a significant weakness. The technology training sessions weren't any better. The Academy's computer systems were designed for direct neural interface, something human brains weren't equipped to handle. While other cadets merged their consciousness with the quantum mainframe, Thorn had to use a clunky manual interface that made him feel like he was trying to perform surgery wearing oven mitts. By the time you input the command, the battle will be over, a Mirian instructor observed as Thorn's fingers flew across the holographic controls. Perhaps we should requisition some stone tablets for you. But what the aliens saw as primitive linear thinking turned out to be an unexpected advantage during a cybersecurity exercise. While his classmates were trapped in a quantum encryption maze, Thorn's limited human perspective spotted a pattern that their more advanced minds had overcomplicated. He broke through the firewall first, though the achievement was dismissed as beginner's luck by both instructors and fellow cadets. It was during the evening meal period that things took a darker turn. Thorn sat alone at his usual table in the Academy's vast dining hall, methodically working his way through a nutrient pack designed for human consumption. The food was bland but efficient, much like everything else about his Academy experience. "Hey, primate." The voice belonged to Raz, a particularly aggressive Kronxian who had taken special interest in making Thorn's life difficult. "I heard an interesting fact about humans today. Is it true your species spent thousands of years killing each other over imaginary territorial lines?" Thorn continued eating, keeping his expression neutral. His grandmother's voice echoed in his head, the truly strong need not respond to every challenge. Raz wasn't finished. "No wonder they keep you in that protective suit. You're so primitive you might infect us with your violence." "Actually," Thorn said, setting down his nutrient pack, "the suit is to protect me from the environmental conditions here. Though I suppose it does have the added benefit of preventing me from catching whatever you've got." The dining hall went silent. Raz's crystalline form flickered with anger, refracting light in aggressive patterns. "Are you implying something about my species, human?" Thorn stood slowly, aware that every eye in the hall was on them. "Not at all. I'm just saying that for a supposedly advanced species, you seem awfully concerned with proving your superiority to a primitive primate." Raz moved with surprising speed for a crystalline being, their arm transforming into a razor-sharp edge as they swung at Thorn's head. But Thorn had been expecting this. He'd spent hours studying Kronxian physiology, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. He ducked under the swing, noting how Raz's crystalline structure took microseconds to reform after rapid movement. That tiny delay was all he needed. Thorn stepped inside Raz's reach, where the Kronxian superior size worked against them in the confined space between tables. "Stop this immediately." The command came from Professor Yxtal, a Mirian instructor who had just entered the hall. Their cybernetic enhancements whirred as they assessed the situation. Fighting outside designated combat areas is strictly prohibited. Raz stepped back, their form returning to its default configuration. The human attacked me, they declared. You all saw it. Their violent nature cannot be contained. But the dining hall's security cameras told a different story. Within hours, both Thorn and Raz were standing before Commandant Axer's holographic form, explaining their actions. Cadet Raz, the Commandant's cosmic eyes swirled with disappointment, your actions were unbecoming of a Galactic Defense Force cadet. 3 days of solitary reflection. Raz's crystalline form dimmed in shame as they were led away. As for you, Cadet Thorn. The Commandant's gaze fixed on him. Your response to provocation was interesting. You chose to defuse rather than escalate, despite having several opportunities to strike. Violence isn't always the answer, sir, Thorn replied, then added with a slight smile, sometimes it's enough just to show you could win if you wanted to. The Commandant's form flickered in what might have been amusement. Indeed. Return to your duties, Cadet. But be warned, not all conflicts can be resolved through restraint. That night, as Thorn lay in his pod reviewing the day's events, he received an unexpected visitor. Zix 427 hovered outside his door, their wings creating subtle patterns in the air. Your performance today was unexpected, they said when Thorn let them in. Most species would have taken the opportunity to prove their strength. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight, Thorn replied. Zix 427's multifaceted eyes studied him with new interest. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge your species' capabilities. After they left, Thorn smiled to himself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The Academy's AI chimed with his evening status update, Cadet Performance Review, Species, Human. Enhanced capabilities, none detected. Biological limitations, multiple. Threat assessment, recalculating. The next morning brought new challenges. The Academy's obstacle course changed its configuration randomly, requiring cadets to adapt instantly to new challenges. Thorn watched as his classmates used their natural abilities to breeze through, Nexilians flying, Etherians phasing through solid matter, Kronxians simply smashing through barriers. Come on, human. Zix 427 called out, but their tone was different now, less mocking and more curious. Show us some of that famous human adaptability. Thorn was drenched in sweat, his muscles screaming from exertion. He couldn't fly, couldn't phase, couldn't smash. But humans had something else, stubborn, relentless determination. Where others saw obstacles, he saw puzzles to be solved. When direct paths were blocked, he found creative alternatives. He finished the course dead last, but he finished. And for the first time, when he looked up at his classmates, he saw something new in their expressions, the first glimmer of respect. As he headed to his next class, Thorn caught snippets of conversation that made him smile. Did you see how he used the gravitational fluctuations to his advantage? I heard he broke through that quantum firewall without even using neural interface. Maybe there's more to these humans than we thought. The day ended with an announcement that would change everything. In 1 week, the Academy would hold its annual combat proficiency exhibition. Each cadet would demonstrate their species' unique capabilities in front of the assembled Galactic Defense Force brass. For most species, it was a chance to shine. For Thorn, it would either be his greatest triumph or his most spectacular failure. As he began planning his demonstration, he remembered something else his grandmother had told him: the oak doesn't need to prove it's strong. It simply needs to remain standing when the storm has passed. Hidden strengths. The week before the combat proficiency exhibition transformed the Academy into a pressure cooker of tension and anticipation. Every training facility was packed with cadets practicing their demonstrations, each trying to outdo the others. The air crackled with biotoxins, quantum energies, and the occasional discharge of plasma weapons. Thorn spent his evenings in Training Chamber 7, the smallest and least popular of the practice rooms. While others showcased their natural abilities, he worked on something different. Something uniquely human. "You're seriously going to attempt this?" Professor Wyextal asked, watching Thorn run through his planned demonstration. The Mirian's cybernetic eyes whirred as they analyzed his movements. "Without enhanced capabilities, the margin for error is concerning." "That's the point," Thorn replied, checking his environmental suit's settings. "Humans don't succeed because we have advantages. We succeed because we learn to work around our limitations." The professor's metallic features arranged themselves into what might have been a frown. "An interesting philosophy. But the exhibition isn't about philosophy, cadet. It's about demonstrating combat effectiveness. With all due respect, Professor, isn't adapting to overcome superior opponents the essence of combat effectiveness?" Before Wyextal could respond, the chamber door hissed open. Zix 427 flew in, their wings creating interference patterns in the holographic training projections. "Thorn," they buzzed, antenna twitching with unusual agitation. "You need to know something. I overheard Raz and some others talking. They're planning something for the exhibition." Thorn continued his practice routine, his movements precise and measured. "I assumed they would be." "No, you don't understand." Zix 427 landed, a rare gesture that indicated serious concern. "They've acquired access codes to the environmental control systems. They're going to try to make me fail." Thorn finished. "Good." Both Zix 427 and Professor Wyextal stared at him. "You're not concerned?" the professor asked. Thorn allowed himself a small smile. "Professor, what's the first thing you learned about humans when we joined the Galactic Defense Force?" "That your species is remarkably primitive in terms of biological capabilities and technological integration." "And the second thing?" "That you are." The professor paused, their cybernetic systems processing. "Unpredictable." "Exactly." Thorn moved to the center of the training chamber. "Computer, run simulation Delta 7. The air shimmered as combat drones materialized around him. Unlike the standard training programs, these were modified to be faster, more aggressive. They attacked without warning, their energy weapons leaving scorch marks on the chamber walls. Thorn moved through them like water, each motion flowing into the next. No wasted energy, no flashy displays of power. Just pure, practiced efficiency. "Remarkable," Professor Wyextal muttered. "You've memorized their attack patterns?" "No," Thorn said, dodging a plasma burst. "I'm reading their movements. Humans spent thousands of years as both predator and prey. We learned to recognize patterns, to anticipate behavior. It's not about having superior abilities. It's about using what you have effectively." The demonstration continued for several minutes, Thorn moving through increasingly complex combat scenarios. When it ended, even Zix 427 seemed impressed. "But what about Raz's plan?" they insisted. "If they disable your environmental systems, then I'll adapt," Thorn said simply. "It's what humans do best." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The academy buzzed with rumors about what each cadet would showcase. The Kronxians were reportedly planning a demonstration of crystalline warfare techniques that hadn't been seen in centuries. The Mirians had developed new applications of their quantum computing abilities that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. And the human? Most assumed he would simply try not to embarrass himself too badly. The night before the exhibition, Thorn received an unexpected message from Commandant Axer requesting his presence. He found the Celestian's holographic form waiting in the Academy's observation dome, the 3 moons of Centaurus Prime creating an ethereal backdrop. Cadet Thorn, the Commandant's cosmic eyes swirled with unreadable emotions. Are you aware that in the Academy's 1,000-year history, no cadet has ever failed the combat proficiency exhibition? Yes, sir. Are you also aware that there are those who believe allowing humans into the Academy was a mistake? That tomorrow's exhibition will be watched by those who would use any failure as evidence that your species is not ready for membership in the Galactic Defense Force. Thorn stood straight, meeting those galaxy-filled eyes. With respect, Commandant, humanity's history is filled with people who said we weren't ready. That we couldn't achieve something. Every time, we proved them wrong. And how did you manage that? By turning our weaknesses into strengths. By using our limitations as motivation to find better solutions. But mostly, by refusing to accept failure as an option. The Commandant's form shifted, colors rippling through the holographic display. An interesting perspective. But tomorrow you face opponents with capabilities far beyond your own. Some of whom, I suspect, may not play fairly. I'm counting on it, sir. Oh. The cosmic eyes focused more intensely. Explain. The exhibition isn't just about showing what we can do, Thorn said. It's about showing who we are. Humans don't just overcome obstacles, sir. We learn from them. Adapt because of them. Every limitation we face makes us stronger. A dangerous philosophy, cadet. It assumes you'll survive the initial challenge. Thorn smiled. That's another thing about humans, sir. We're very, very hard to kill. The Commandant's form flickered in what might have been amusement. Indeed. Well, Cadet Thorn, tomorrow you'll have your chance to prove that theory. I hope, for humanity's sake, that you're right. As Thorn left the observation dome, he received another update from the Academy's AI, Cadet Performance Review, Species, Human. Enhanced capabilities, none detected. Biological limitations, multiple. Threat assessment, calculation error. Recalibrating parameters. In his pod that night, Thorn made final adjustments to his environmental suit. He knew Raz and the others would try to sabotage him. They expected him to fail, to prove their assumptions about human weakness correct. But they had made a crucial mistake. They thought his environmental suit was his weakness, when in fact it was exactly what he needed them to focus on. While they planned their sabotage, he had been preparing something else entirely. Tomorrow would change everything. Not just for him, but for every human who would follow him into the Academy. He would show them all what humanity's greatest strength really was. It wasn't about physical capabilities or technological integration or biological advantages. It was about something far more fundamental, the ability to turn any disadvantage into an opportunity, to find strength in weakness, to succeed not despite limitations but because of them. As he drifted off to sleep, Thorn smiled. Tomorrow, they would learn why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because of what they could do, but because of what everyone else thought they couldn't. The exhibition. The exhibition arena gleamed under the light of Centaurus Prime's 3 moons, its quantum-reinforced walls designed to contain even the most powerful demonstrations of alien combat capabilities. The stands were packed with Galactic Defense Force officials, potential employers, and the entire Academy population. Next demonstration, Cadet Thorn, Human Division, announced the combat instructor. The massive arena fell silent, then erupted in poorly concealed snickers. Vex leaned over to Zix 427. This should be entertaining. What's he going to show us, how to breathe oxygen? Thorn stepped into the arena, his environmental suit gleaming under the harsh lights. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, determined to prove that humans deserved their place in the Academy. The suit's heads-up display showed optimal readings across all systems, for now. Begin combat simulation, the instructor commanded. The holographic enemies materialized, a standard set of combat drones programmed to test reflexes and tactical thinking. Thorn moved with practiced precision, each step calculated, each strike measured. Then everything went wrong. His environmental suit systems flickered and died. Warning lights flashed across his helmet display before going dark. Through his rapidly fogging visor, Thorn caught glimpses of Raz and several others trying to suppress their laughter. Having technical difficulties, human. Vex called out, their crystalline form glittering with amusement. Perhaps you should have brought some backup stone tools. The combat drones, unaware of his predicament, continued their attack pattern. Without his suit's enhanced capabilities, Thorn was effectively blind and defenseless in front of the entire academy. Something snapped inside him. Months of mockery, dismissal, and barely concealed contempt crystallized into a single clarifying moment of rage. With shaking hands, Thorn reached up and unsealed his helmet. "Cadet, that is not advisable," the instructor began. Thorn threw the helmet aside. Then, piece by piece, he stripped off the sabotaged environmental suit until he stood in his basic academy uniform. The arena had gone completely silent. "You want to see what humans can do?" he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned audience. "Let me show you." Without the suit's interface, he couldn't see the drone's tactical displays or prediction patterns. But humans had spent millennia fighting without augmented reality or neural interfaces. They'd survived and thrived using something far more primitive and far more powerful, instinct. Thorn moved like his ancestors had moved when hunting on the savannas of Earth, reading subtle shifts in air currents, anticipating movement patterns, striking with precision born from desperation. Each drone that fell was a statement. Each perfectly timed dodge was a rebuttal to every sneer and dismissal he'd endured. The audience watched in stunned silence as Thorn dismantled drone after drone, using their own attack patterns against them. He turned their coordinated assaults into opportunities, letting them crash into each other, redirecting their energy weapons to hit other targets. When the last drone crashed to the arena floor, Thorn stood unscathed, breathing heavily, fists clenched. He turned to face his classmates, locking eyes with Raz and Vex. "Impossible," Raz whispered. "Without the environmental suit, without neural interfaces, without any enhancements." Professor Weichstal's cybernetic systems whirred as they analyzed the performance. He didn't just survive, they announced to the silent arena. He achieved the highest efficiency rating in the Academy's history. Commandant Axer's holographic form materialized in the center of the arena. Cadet Thorn, the cosmic eyes swirled with something that might have been pride. "Your environmental suit was sabotaged. You could have requested a postponement." "With respect, Commandant," Thorn replied, still breathing hard, "that wouldn't have proven anything." "And what exactly have you proven today?" Thorn stood straight, addressing not just the Commandant but the entire arena. "That humanity's greatest strength isn't in our technology or our physical capabilities. It's in our ability to adapt, to overcome, to turn disadvantages into advantages. You all thought my environmental suit was my weakness. But depending on it, that was the real weakness." The Commandant's form shifted through a spectrum of colors. "An impressive demonstration, Cadet. But also a reckless one. You risked your life to make a point." "No, sir. I risked my life to show that humans don't need protection or special accommodation. We need opportunity. Give us that, and we'll find a way to succeed." A slow clap started somewhere in the stands. To everyone's surprise, it came from Zix 427. Others joined in, the applause spreading until it filled the arena. In the aftermath, things changed quickly. The Academy's AI updated its assessment, Cadet Performance Review, Species, Human. Enhanced Capabilities, Recategorizing. Biological Limitations, Reassessing. Threat Assessment, Significant. But more importantly, attitudes began to shift. Raz and several others were disciplined for the sabotage attempt, but Thorn's response had earned their grudging respect. The mocking comments in the halls gave way to curious questions about human training methods. That evening, as Thorn sat in the dining hall, his table wasn't empty. Zix 427 landed beside him, followed by several other cadets. "We've been thinking," Zix 427 said, their wings creating intricate patterns of apology in the air. "Perhaps there are things we could learn from each other. Your perspective on combat is unlike anything we've seen." Thorn smiled. "That's another human trait. We're always eager to learn. And to teach." As the conversation flowed, Thorn caught Commandant Axer watching from across the hall. The Celestian's holographic form nodded once, then disappeared. The message was clear: Thorn hadn't just proven himself. He'd opened a door for all of humanity. In his pod that night, he recorded a message to his grandmother: "You were right. The oak doesn't need to prove its strength. But sometimes, showing others what we're capable of isn't about pride. It's about creating understanding." Outside his window, the 3 moons of Centaurus Prime cast their light on the Academy's spires. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning, carrying billions of humans who would never know how much had changed today. But they would feel it. In the opportunities that would open, in the respect that would be earned, in the partnerships that would form between humans and alien species who finally understood that limitation wasn't weakness, it was motivation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But now, everyone at the Academy understood one fundamental truth: never underestimate a species that had spent its entire history overcoming the impossible. Legacy. 1 year after the exhibition, the Academy's quantum lift doors hissed open to reveal a sight that would have been unthinkable 12 months ago: a human instructor teaching advanced combat techniques to a mixed class of alien cadets. Thorn stood at the center of the training chamber, his environmental suit long since modified to be more streamlined and efficient. "Combat isn't about having superior abilities," he explained to the gathered cadets, including several Kronxians, Mirians, and even a young Celestian whose form rippled with attention. "It's about understanding how to use whatever abilities you have effectively." The past year had transformed both Thorn and the Academy. His exhibition performance had sparked a revolution in combat training methodology. Species that had relied solely on their natural advantages began studying human adaptation techniques. The Academy's curriculum now included mandatory classes on innovative thinking and adaptive strategy. Instructor Thorn, a Kronxian cadet, raised their crystalline hand. "Is it true that humans once hunted prey larger than themselves using only primitive tools?" "Persistence hunting," Thorn nodded. "We'd track animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. It's not about being the strongest or fastest. It's about being the most determined." Zix 427, now his teaching assistant, buzzed with amusement. "Sounds like your first few months at the Academy." The comment drew knowing laughter from the class. The story of Thorn's exhibition had become Academy legend, told and retold to each new batch of recruits. But more importantly, it had changed how the Galactic Defense Force viewed human potential. After class, Commandant Axer's holographic form appeared in the chamber. "The first human graduating class arrives next week," the Celestian announced. 20 cadets. The Academy board was hesitant. Until they saw the application test results, Thorn smiled. The new human candidates had scored exceptionally well, particularly in adaptive problem-solving and creative strategy. "Indeed. Your exhibition did more than prove your own worth, Instructor Thorn. It forced us to reevaluate our entire understanding of species potential." The Academy's AI chimed in: "Update to species classification database, humans reclassified. Primary advantages: adaptive capability, innovative problem-solving, determination. Threat assessment, significant. Note, traditional metrics inadequate for human potential evaluation." That evening, Thorn found Raz waiting outside his quarters. The Kronxian's crystalline form had matured over the year, now displaying the complex patterns of a senior cadet. "The combat exhibition finals are tomorrow," Raz said. "I've been studying human combat techniques. They're surprisingly elegant." "High praise, coming from you," Thorn replied. Their relationship had evolved from antagonism to mutual respect, another symbol of the Academy's transformation. The younger cadets talk about you like you're some kind of legend, Raz continued. The human who changed everything. But that's not quite right, is it? You didn't change us. You showed us what we could learn from being wrong. Being underestimated has its advantages, Thorn smiled. It teaches you to see potential where others see limitations. Later, in the observation dome, Thorn watched the 3 moons of Centaurus Prime rise while recording his annual report to Earth. The Human Integration Initiative had exceeded all expectations. The next Academy term would include human instructors in quantum physics, xenobiology, and strategic operations. The galaxy is changing, he recorded. Not because humans are exceptional, but because we reminded everyone that exceptional isn't about natural advantages. It's about what you do with what you have. His grandmother's book, The Art of War, sat on his desk, its pages are now annotated with observations about alien combat techniques and strategic principles that transcended species. Next to it lay a new volume he was writing, Adaptive Combat, a Human Perspective on Galactic Warfare. The Academy's training programs now incorporated elements from Earth's military history, from ancient Roman tactics to modern guerrilla warfare. Species that had once dismissed human military accomplishments as primitive now studied them with fascination. Cadet Thorn, Professor Weichstal's voice interrupted his recording. The Mirian's cybernetic systems had been upgraded with human-inspired adaptive algorithms. The board requests your presence. It's about the Frontier Defense Initiative. The initiative was Thorn's proposal for mixed-species combat units, combining the natural abilities of different races with human adaptive tactics. Initial tests had shown promising results, with teams demonstrating capabilities greater than the sum of their parts. As he walked to the board meeting, Thorn passed the Academy's main hall, where a new holographic display showed the institution's core principles. Among them, recently added, adaptation is the greatest strength. The next generation of human cadets would enter an academy very different from the one he'd found. They wouldn't face the same prejudices or dismissal. Instead, they'd find a place where human innovation was valued, where limitation was seen as a catalyst for creativity, where being different wasn't a weakness but an opportunity. In the end, Thorn realized, his grandmother had been right about another thing. The oak doesn't just grow stronger with each challenge, it changes the forest around it, creating space for new growth, new possibilities. As he entered the board chamber, Thorn smiled. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But that was exactly how humans liked it. After all, there would always be new challenges, new limitations to overcome, new impossibilities to disprove. And now, thanks to one exhibition that changed everything, the entire galaxy would face them together, each species contributing not despite their differences, but because of them. The last human standing had become the first human to show the way forward.